Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Jake Gordon and Alex Lord. The Georgia Bulldogs they've kind of had this like in every one of their games. They've been very slow starting. This was obviously the scariest. This was the first real opponent of the season in South Carolina. They go down 14-3 going into the half. They miss a couple of I don't know. The field goal kicker for Georgia needs to be examined because he couldn't make a field goal inside 30 yards. What was it? Twice. But then they dominate the second half. And this is kind of like Georgia when you talk about just who they become. And it's like it seems like they never blink. And that happened a lot under Stetson Bennett. But even when they were down 14-3, you always thought, oh, they'll get it together. They'll get it together. And they dominated the second half. I think they won it 21-0. They win the game by 10. But the first half and just the offense in particular, I mean, for the first time in quite some time, it feels like we can talk about Georgia. It's like, oh, they got a few kinks in the armor. Now, will they get better as the year goes on? We'll see. But obviously not the best look in the first half against South Carolina and Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, this was. I was in the building. I was not happy during the first half. I was in an extremely bad mood. And it was also raining, so that didn't help at all. Yeah. I mean, you look at that first half, and it was very reminiscent of the Missouri game. Just not a lot going right. But if you really, this was one of those when I said I'm going to wake up on Sunday and I'm going to not feel as bad about this one. And that's kind of what happened. You look, South Carolina scores on the first drive, scripted drive. You can chalk that up to whatever. The next time they score, they get a big time deep ball and they kind of dink and dunk down the field, and then they get a quarterback rushing touchdown. Not feeling great, but after that, I mean, it was absolute domination. Spencer Rattler had an incredible first half. He was like 15-18. He was out there running around, slinging it around, and then the second half he goes like 5-13 with 2 picks. So they locked it down. They made some great second half adjustments. I do agree the offense cannot keep starting slow like this. It's going to end up biting them. They're going to lose to somebody. But it's going to be it's going to be an interesting season. I don't know. I'm not too confident that they're going to go undefeated anymore. I certainly hope they do, obviously. But I don't feel that terrible about this game. It was a lot worse in the first half. I mean, a lot better in the first half than I really thought it was. But there was just a lot of stuff that needs to be ironed out.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to the Falcons, Georgia fans shouldn't, like you're saying, you shouldn't feel bad today. You won the game. It wasn't pretty, but don't apologize for ugly wins. Like never. I don't care who you are, what sport it is, never apologize for an ugly win. And that's what Georgia did. And it seems like that's going to be the formula for success this year. Play defense, and hopefully that the athletes on the offensive side of the ball can take a 3-yard pitch and catch to the house. I mean, that seems to be the formula for success until Bobo and Beck figure it out. That's the thing that needs to be watched all season is can Bobo figure things out with Beck? Can Beck execute Bobo's offense? And listen, it's the third game of the year. If any Georgia fan expected this team to look like it did with Stetson Bennett and Todd Monken after 3 games, you're delusional, or your expectations are totally flawed. It's going to take maybe even a full season for them to get everything ironed out, figure out the ebbs and flows of the new offense, what each other like, what playmakers are doing. I think there's, no reason to press the panic button just yet. The defense is still littered with first-round picks. The offense is too. And Bobo, sure, he's under a microscope. He better figure it out. There's no doubt about that. But I think there's plenty of time. When's Tennessee? When's the next?
It's the end of November. Well, they're awful anyways. They're
Florida and Tennessee.
And I told everybody that
they'll be up for that game though.
But here's the thing. Well, you think they'd be up for Florida, but their coach just called a timeout at the end of the game so they can cheap shot the quarterback. We'll talk about the rest of the slate later. The thing that really pisses me off, as our resident special teams guy, is the missed field goals. That drives me absolutely up the wall. You can't come away empty-handed. You're the number 1 kicker in the nation last year at a high school. You got to hit these chip shot field goals.
I was in shock. Like missed these. I was like, what?
It's so really funny that coaches,
and they weren't even close. They were like
coaches hate kickers. Like any good football coach absolutely hates their kicker. They have to. Like it's just in their blood. And I guarantee, that was driving Kirby up the wall almost more than anything, because special teams is an area where Georgia has excelled, especially punting. Brett Thorson, maybe the best punter in America. You don't see him that often. 3 punts, 3 down inside the 20. But, yeah, it's cleaning up special teams is so important. Special teams can win and lose you a ball game. Especially, we saw, the Jets last week against the Bills on Monday Night Football. It's special teams, they matter. And that's something that I really want to see cleaned up even more so than the offense.
Well, you don't notice special teams until they lose you a game or win you a game, and then you're thankful or you hate them. You're absolutely right. Third phase of the game is so important, and it often goes unnoticed.
Yeah, I mean, and just back to the whole offense thing. I mean, this is something that I talked about before the season, and a lot of UGA fans were like, "Oh, Mike Bobo was in the building, like he was calling things on third down." I'm like, bro, it's a lot different being the guy and not, and like, dude, changing coordinators. I mean, if you're a Falcons fan and a Georgia fan, I mean, just think back to when Sarkisian obviously is a great coach, great offensive mind. He's not Kyle Shanahan. So when the Falcons lost Kyle Shanahan, you saw how and it wasn't even that Sarkisian was a bad coach. It's just different. It's just different. It's just switching philosophies and switching coaches. It goes very unnoticed. And I feel like I remember taking Kyle Shanahan for granted, being, oh, we'll be fine. We have all this talent. Sarkisian will come in and just be able to fix it. Sarkisian's a good coach. Just didn't work out like that. And it's going to take time. And
some of it is personnel is the problem, though. Like, Georgia's so thin at running back. They just lost to Amarius Mims, which was – you talk about biggest concerns of the game. Mine is Amarius Mims sprained his ankle. He's literally a top 10 pick at tackle that is probably going to miss a couple weeks now. That was my biggest. Yeah, Ladd's back is still bothering him. These are my main concerns, but the thing is, like, they have no depth at running back. They just got Dejon Edwards back, and they just ran for 100 yards for the first time. They're running wide receivers out of the backfield, so some of it is personnel. But I do understand what you're saying, Chase.
Yeah, and like you said, though, like, they got time to figure it out. Like, they really don't, like, if there's one year like where you're thanking God, like, you don't have this ridiculously tough schedule in the SEC. I mean, listen, what's the toughest game remaining on Georgia's schedule? Ole Miss.
Tennessee
they play Ole Miss later.
Tennessee, Florida, and Ole Miss, those will all be tough games.
Yeah, I mean, they're tough, but they're nothing Georgia, and they all are later in the year. There's nothing – Georgia should win all those games. They play Auburn in Jordan-Hare. That'll be interesting. That's in, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
That should be a fun one. We'll see what Hugh Freeze can dial up. They didn't exactly look like they were doing much against Cal, so we'll see. I just think Georgia – it's tough to worry about them because I look at their schedule and I'm like, I don't see where they lose. Like, I still don't see where they lose. It doesn't matter how bad they play because they just have that aura about them.
They'll be favored in every single game from here on to the end of the season.
Well, like I said, we're about to talk about the rest of the slate, but like, I mean, Tennessee, I've tried telling their fans, like, you just lost your quarterback, your two best receivers, your best tackle, one of your best defenders, and you think you're just going to roll everything back out there and it's all going to be sweet again. Like, that's just not how it works. And
no. Yeah, I got something to say about that.
Yeah, oh, trust me, I do too. No, do you see how far their quarterback can throw produce? Are you kidding?
Yeah, I remember saying that in the offseason. I don't care if you could throw it over.
I will say that one pick that Joe Milton threw where he was like getting hammered and like still somehow threw it like 60 yards. I was like, that was impressive, but like it's still a pick.
He's like a gimmicky. It's like one of the who's the basketball players?
Let's get into it. We're going to talk about the whole rest of the slate coming up after the break.